Hello, you're watching Money Talks with me, Taiba Aiden. Coming up on the program, a major IT outage hits industries around the world, disrupting services from banking to travel. African countries seek alternatives amid rising debt and living costs. And is luxury dead? We look at why the boom in bling is so last year. Global equities ended the week in the red, with the tech sector under heavy pressure after a global IT outage disrupted activities in sectors from travel to telecommunications. The outage was allegedly caused by an update from cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, which caused a problem with Microsoft's Windows. Shares of CrowdStrike plunged more than 15% on Friday, while Microsoft lost around 2% in pre-market trading. It follows a week of turmoil in markets after reports of tighter export restrictions from the world's largest economy sent global chip stocks tumbling. Dennis Kenji Kipka, a research director at the Cyber Intelligence Institute in Frankfurt, has more on the situation.
Yeah, so normally CrowdStrike is a standard cybersecurity company, and they are in charge of a lot of different security functions. They're a big US security company, and they are well known in the industry. So a lot of companies and state authorities rely on CrowdStrike since several years. So regarding this outage, this is very surprising for a lot of people, because normally you would think that a cybersecurity company provides cybersecurity for your services, but now we see that a cybersecurity company might have destroyed the cloud services. I've said this is still under investigation, but we see that you cannot rely completely on cloud services, and especially Microsoft Azure at the moment. So there are a lot of companies relying on cloud services, and that means cloud productivity services. So software suites such as Microsoft 365, they contain not only data storage, but they contain also programs like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, where every company relies on every day. And when these systems, which are very critical, are not functioning anymore, we see that even emails cannot be sent out properly. So whole communication can be down, just caused by this disruption of the Microsoft cloud services we currently see. And Microsoft is working on this issue as far as I know, but they are still not aware on how this clearly happened. So this might be the reason that there has been a security update, faulty security update, which has been rolled out by CrowdStrike. But we normally have 3 different server farms in the US which are working independently, and all of them are currently down. Microsoft is working on this issue to get the systems back online, but we see a lot of outages at the moment worldwide.
African countries have often turned to the IMF for funding during economic disruption and when they are unable to get financing domestically or from markets. The perfect storm is created when government spending and tax policies put in place to allegedly improve economic conditions and people's livelihoods have been met with resistance. Africa's debt is at its highest level in over a decade. Russia's war in Ukraine, soaring inflation and COVID-19 forced the continent to borrow more, and now 20 low-income African countries are at a high risk of debt distress. Kenya, Ghana, Uganda and Benin are among 42 African countries that have reached out to the IMF for funding. Egypt, Angola, Kenya, Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire are among the top 10 African countries with the highest debt to the IMF. The composition of African debt has changed significantly. The majority of African external debt was previously owed to high-income countries and lenders like the IMF and World Bank. Now private creditors and China make up a large portion of debt stock. African governments spend more on debt service at the expense of critical services due to higher interest payments on private loans. Increasing taxes is in line with an IMF program that African countries sign up to avoid debt distress and to access new financing. Let's take a look at Ghana, which has been dealing with a debt crisis that sparked its worst recession in decades. It recently secured a deal to restructure around $13 billion of its foreign debt. But businesses and ordinary people are left to deal with the crisis on their own. Isaac Kaleji reports from the capital, Accra.
Christiana Isel Mensah runs this small bakery in Ghana's Upper East regional town of Bolgatanga. Nowadays, she barely makes any profit due to Ghana's worsening economic crisis.
20. And this one, it is very difficult these days. We are only trying to break even and for the business to stand. But for making outrageous profits is not more there these days. Flour, the cost of flour has gone up, sugar has gone up, margarine has gone up, everything.
It is not just business owners like Christiana who are struggling. Sule Inusa, a university graduate who offers mobile money transaction services in Tamale, doesn't make much either.
For the past, let me see, 4 years, I've not bought any, let's see, personal things like clothing and other things. Any money I get is on what? On food. Because you need to satisfy those needs before you now think of you getting a nice perfume, a nice trousers, or a nice sandals.
Ghana's economy has been on a bad footing for the past 4 years, triggered by a major debt crisis. About half of its current $42.7 billion public debt is owed to external creditors. Just last month, the government secured a vital deal to restructure that debt.
We've reached agreement with the official creditors, bilateral creditors, on the restructuring of $5.1 billion. This will lead to debt service relief of $2.8 billion between 2023 and 2026.
Analysts say a deal could now give the government a chance to implement its economic recovery program under the IMF.
So what it means is that obligations that are due for payment will be deferred to, the subsequent year. So it allows the government to accumulate resources to be able to meet repayment in the near future.
Ghana turned to the IMF for support in 2022 as it struggled to service its debts largely caused by excessive borrowing. It has taken 2 years to reach a deal with external creditors so the country can have some cash flow relief up until 2026 when the IMF program ends.
The government has promised to fix the economic crisis, but for businesses like that of Mensa's, time may be running out. Isaac Kaleji, TRT World, Accra, Ghana.
For more, let's bring in Mukhtar Mohammed, an international finance and economic analyst. He joins us now from Lagos, Nigeria. Good to have you with us, Mukhtar. Now, how does Africa's $800 billion debt burden and the lack of transparency in resource-backed loans affect its economic development?
Well, unfortunately, that's where Africa find themselves. When you look at resource-backed loan, how does it affect our potential and economic growth? What happens is that some of these loans are taken out of this. Some of these debt are backed by resources, and some of these resources are not be able to use it to grow the economy because those are the resources that could create jobs and also create economic activities in those economies. Take an instance of a country like Ghana, a country like Nigeria, where they collect loans and these loans are backed either by cocoa production or by crude oil. And then in turn, what happens is that when you have all these things like this, then there's more back burden on the government to be able to pay up those debts. And those debts always come with some conditions that are not good for the economic situation to grow the economy, because some of those debts, when we collect some of those debts, especially African nations, are tied to some very strenuous economics policy that it's become very difficult for the government to even create job or create economic activities. And what you see then is that smaller businesses that are the key drivers of most of developing economy, especially African economy, are now left to starve for fun, and then before you know it, they are no more in business.
Right now, with African countries allocating 65% of their GDP to debt servicing, what kind of implications does that have on public spending and other development initiatives?
Well, what it has on public spending, you say 65%, that is for debt servicing. Some African countries are doing 85%. There was a time that Nigeria was doing about 90% in debt servicing. And so what you see when you have such burden, because now you have only, let me use your narration of 65%, then you have 35% that is who should be allocated for capital expenditure, and then will be allocated for recurrent expenditure. And what you now find is that capital expenditure might even take 35% again. Then when there's no, recurrent expenditure will take 35%. So there's no room for capital project that will create growth in the economy, that will provide infrastructure that businesses will use to strive and grow. So what you now see that the cycle of debt continues. So for the government to be able to do any meaningful project there, they will have to go and borrow again. And so that cycle continues. So definitely it's not good for them. And that has been the trend of Africa thus far, because the cycle keep coming, because the more debt we collect, the more projects we are not able to implement. And sometimes when these projects are tied, like the Chinese debt, are tied to a specific project, this project takes a long time, 25 years, 30 years, what we call PPP. But then for the next 20 to 35 years, they are the ones to manage and collect revenue from those jobs, and then also bring in their own professionals to handle this job. So there's no manpower development in the side of Africa, and also we are losing a lot of revenue because those contracts are tied to specific terms that are not favorable to the economy.
All right, Mukhtar Mohammed, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Now, Rwandan President Paul Kagame has won his 4th term in office. As he begins another term, we turn our attention to the country's economic outlook, which has seen significant growth under his leadership. However, amid these economic achievements, questions about political freedom and governance persists. Nicholas Morgan has more.
President Paul Kagame has secured a landslide victory in the presidential election, winning 99% of the vote, according to preliminary results. Kagame, who has been in power in various capacities since 1994, cast his vote in Kigali, reaffirming his commitment to leading Rwanda towards continued prosperity. Kagame's government has implemented numerous economic policies aimed at transforming Rwanda into a hub of economic activity in East Africa. The economy witnessed a significant growth rate of 9.7% in the first quarter of 2024, driven by robust performances in the industry and service sectors. Agricultural production, particularly food crops like maize and beans, saw substantial increases, contributing to this growth. The industry sector grew by 10%, with notable increases in mining, quarrying, and construction activities. The service sector expanded by 11%, fueled by gains in wholesale and retail trade, transportation, and telecommunications. Rwanda's economic resurgence is evident, yet criticisms persist. Despite the economic successes, Kagame faces accusations of stifling dissent and governing with a heavy hand. Critics argue that the political landscape remains tightly controlled, with several vocal opponents barred from running in the election. International observers were present to monitor the elections, but concerns about political freedoms continue to surface.
We have freedom. We govern ourselves. There is no divisionism. He removed all of that. There used to be division based on Hutu Tutsi, but he abolished all of that. He abolished the IDs that showed your ethnicity. Now we are all Rwandan.
Personally, I feel this is a celebration because this is what I wanted. I wanted him to win. There is absolutely no problem with the votes he got. Personally, I'm so happy. My heart is full of joy. There is so much he has achieved that ensured he got these votes.
Kagame's administration continues to be credited for Rwanda's dramatic economic revival and maintaining internal peace since the 1994 genocide. As Rwanda moves forward, the focus will remain on balancing economic growth with addressing the concerns of political freedoms and human rights. Nicholas Morgan, TRT World.
A new parliamentary session has opened in Britain, and the new Prime Minister Keir Starmer says change is going to take some time. During the ceremonial King's speech on Wednesday, King Charles outlined his new Labour government's priorities to stabilise the economy. Shadia Edwards-Dashti reports.
For the first time in 14 years, a parliamentary session opens with Labour in power.
How are you going to pay for all this?
In the run-up to this moment, a promise to rebuild Britain, delivering economic stability. A day of pomp and pageantry with a ceremony of age-old traditions. The King's speech is written entirely by the government. His Majesty is just the messenger. Setting out the government's plans for the year ahead, outlining 40 new draft bills, starting with this.
Stability will be the cornerstone of my government's economic policy, and every decision will be consistent with its fiscal rules.
For the Prime Minister, today the aim is to inject some urgency and energy to try and convince voters that he is turning his campaign promises into a reality. The new draft bills, months in the making, is, in his words, proof that politics can be a force of good and that change is coming.
This government has been elected to deliver nothing less than national renewal, to stop the chaos of the past 14 years, turn the page on an era of politics as noisy performance, and return it to public service.
In his first week on the job, Starmer has represented Britain at NATO and shaken hands with President Biden in the Oval Office. Today, the King positioned the UK on a global stage, from supporting Ukraine, trade and security pacts with the EU, and even Palestine.
My government will play its part in trying to secure long-term peace and security in the Middle East. It is committed to a two-state solution with a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state.
But is it enough to appease the hundreds of thousands of people that have long taken to the streets of London? In any case, how the tables turn. Keir Starmer is now in the driving seat, winning votes on policy that will, quote, help the country move on from the cost of living crisis. He promises change, but after 14 years of austerity, change for the British people can't come soon enough. Shadia Edwards-Dashti, TRT World, London.
The European Central Bank's actions in the past month have had an impact on inflation and loan demand across the Eurozone. And as the ECB's inflation control measures take effect, the financial sector shows varied recovery trends, offering both challenges and opportunities for the months ahead. Lara Kılıçarslan has the story.
For the first time since 2022, the European Central Bank is reporting a rise in demand for consumer credit and housing loans in Germany and Spain. And while the demand continues to fall in France and Italy, the ECB says this mixed trend highlights a gradual economic recovery.
So in the coming months, we will receive more data, which will help us assess whether we are sufficiently confident in the path ahead to move to the next phase of our policy cycle.
The European Central Bank began its most aggressive tightening cycle in 2022. Pandemic-era measures had pushed inflation in the bloc to record highs. The bank then raised interest rates for 10 consecutive months, which brought its key deposit rate to a record 4% and managed to tame inflation.
Higher interest rates and lower fixed investment continue to exert dampening pressure on loan demand from firms. At the same time, improving housing market prospects, consumer confidence and spending on durables positively supported demand from households.
Inflation in the 20-nation bloc is expected to slowly ease in the coming months, with the ECB seeing some positive movement ahead. Banks also expect demand for loans to increase across all categories in the third quarter, and analysts say this shows a hopeful outlook for the region's financial stability.
Banks' risk tolerance was the main driver behind the net tightening for loans to firms. Competition also contributed to an easing of credit standards for housing loans.
Economists forecast that inflation will ease. The economic rebound, though slow, offers hope for financial stability. But it remains to be seen if these short-term signs will lead to lasting growth. Lara Kılıçarslan, TRT World.
Luxury retailers that enjoyed bountiful profits in recent years are beginning to feel some pain. Sales have dropped for most European luxury brands, and they're cutting their earnings outlook for the whole of 2024 as Chinese consumers start to tone down the bling. Ömer Bakkaloğlu has more.
It's more than just the appeal of owning a high-end item.
Luxury goods are a statement of status, an expression of taste. Post-pandemic, this allure led to a remarkable surge in demand, with consumers engaging in revenge spending to make up for lost time and experiences. But the boom is coming to an end, with signs of a stark slowdown. Rising geopolitical tensions have affected the global economy, and this has impacted on the demand for luxury items. And as the economic landscape changes, so too does consumer behavior.
In terms of income, saving, or purchasing power, personally, I haven't lost much. But we are worried about the future. We think that the economy is going to stagnate for a relatively long time, so there is some pessimism. The desire to consume is diminishing. Everyone tends to manage their money a bit more strictly and to save more.
2 years ago, we used to go out for hot spot in restaurants, but now, to save a bit, we are cooking at home instead. The same goes for clothes. Before, I used to go to department stores. Now, I tend to go online or to small boutiques to buy cheaper items. As long as it fits me, that's enough for me.
Chinese consumers were the driving force behind the luxury market's growth. But a shift in spending habits is now rippling through the industry, causing tremors far beyond China's borders. A slowdown in the luxury sector has hit Burberry harder than its rivals, sending shares down around 60% over the last 12 months. The British brand reported a 21% fall in underlying sales for the second quarter and warned that it would scrap this year's dividend to invest in growth. German fashion house Hugo Boss has cut its sales and earnings forecast for the year after reporting second quarter profits below expectations. Switzerland's two largest watchmaking giants, Richemont and Swatch Group, also confirmed a brutal China-led pullback. The luxury giants posted double-digit falls in both earnings and sales for the quarter and cut guidance for the whole year. Luxury goods in China are now being discounted at rates as high as 50%, as retailers look to revive sales in a slowing economy. But this trend now raises a big question. Can luxury brands retain their prestige by slashing their prices? Ömer Bakkaloğlu, TRT World.
Meanwhile, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is set to travel to Serbia for talks with his counterpart Alexander Vučić on Friday. The major topic under discussion will be the critical raw materials required for battery supply chains and electric cars. Serbia is estimated to possess up to 10% of the world's lithium reserves, making it a valuable resource for electric vehicle manufacturers. British-Australian mining giant Rio Tinto discovered lithium deposits in Serbia's Jadar Valley in 2004. But after protests and concerns over the environment and public health, the government halted the mining project in 2022. Last week, Serbia's constitutional court overturned that decision. The lithium project in Jadar has the potential to cover 90% of Europe's current lithium needs and could make Rio Tinto a leading lithium producer. The project could bring significant economic gains, contributing to 16% of GDP, or approximately $12 billion annually. Residents of the Jadar Valley and environmentalists express fears about the negative impact of mining and processing lithium, fearing potential consequences on the local ecosystem and agriculture. Germany is moving to ban China's Huawei and ZTE from its 5G networks. At the same time, countries around the world are raising their customs tariffs, one after another. Does this trend suggest a failure of globalization? Let's take a look.
Is the free trade era over? Citing national security concerns, Germany is planning to ban Chinese telco giants from its 5G networks. That announcement follows an EU decision to hit Chinese EV makers with a 48% tariff. The US already has a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs, effectively banning them from the market. Turkey charges 40% on Chinese automotive imports, and Indonesia a whopping 200% on a range of Chinese products. The US has also targeted China with tariffs on steel and aluminum shipped via Mexico. The situation has been downgraded, officially from a trade war to tension. But the scenario is familiar. Back in 2018, a full-scale US-China trade war was in full swing. The US practiced nationalist protectionism, while outwardly being the biggest cheerleader for the free trade. It banned Android sales to Huawei, prompting Huawei to develop Harmony OS, which is now China's second most popular mobile operating system. Will these new tariffs have the same effect? And are we looking at the end of globalization?
And if you have any stories you'd like our reporters to look into or any questions for our experts, you can reach out to us on X at TRT Money Talks. Well, that is all from Money Talks for now. From me and the whole team here in Istanbul, thanks for watching.